Might as well start. So yeah, good morning and welcome everyone. And I'll ask Pearl to do the opening karakia, please.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi mahana o te atanei. He karakia timatanga, kia tau mai te rangimari, te manamatanga, kia tau mai te rangimari, kia tau mai te kaha me te aroha o tēnei kaupapa. Kuie taiki.
Thank you, Beryl. Really appreciate that. So with that, do we have any apologies? We have one leave of absence from Councillor Walker and apologies from
Councillor Hill and Mayor King.
someone. Happy to move those apologies. Move Councillor Marling, seconded Councillor Dowler. All those in favour will say aye. Against, the resolution is carried. Public forum, Robin, there isn't any. So with that, before we carry on, Richard, you've got some staff you'd like to introduce to us?
Yes, we've got a real quota of new staff this month. Decided to bring it forward now. I was not sure when we're going to do the infrastructure group meeting. But first of all, Matt Keys. Matt is not in at the moment.
Right. Well, someone come to the door before. That might have been Matt, was it?
Oh, okay. Ray West is Ray.
Hi, Ray. Welcome.
Ray's water quality and safety specialist. Rosemary Nelson.
Good morning.
Yeah, and
welcome.
Also water quality and safety specialist. These are the two new roles that we require to implement our requirements under the Water Services Act. Hello, there, Water Services Act. Rob Coleman. Yep.
Good morning, Rob. Welcome.
Rob's Reserves Officer, Recreation Systems. So he's in Reserves team with Richard Hollier. Grant Reburn.
Good morning, welcome.
And Grant's also in Richard's team, and he's the Reserves Officer for, where are we? Yep, Reserves Officer, that's right, for contracts and projects. Did I get that right? Yeah, good.
So that sounds like Glenn Thorne's replacement.
That's correct.
As I understand it, this year in the role.
Correct. And Rob is replacing Gary Alsop, who left us. Yeah.
Oh no, welcome and hope you enjoy your time here at Tasman. So warm welcome to you all. Now they've been through that, you can start work for the day.
Good.
Because we're up plenty. So thanks very much, guys. Girls. So that brings us to declarations of interest. Do we have any? Late items, there are none. I'll take it, Robin. Confirmations of minutes held on the Thursday, the 31st of March, 2022. Someone like to move that be correct record? Move Councillor McKenzie, seconded Councillor Tufnell. All those in favour will say aye. Against? Carried. And so with that, we'll move on to our first item today, which is the Joint Regional Cemeteries approval of Memorandum of Understanding, which is in your name, Richard, and for councillors, it's on page 4 of Diligent. So welcome, Richard, and when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. This report updates on the draft Memorandum of Understanding that now requires approval from both Nelson City and Tasman District Council, which is relating to the development of a joint cemetery. And so we have Councillor Marling and Councillor Turley, the council representatives on that working group. And so the memorandum is put forward, as I say, for approval, and also attached to the report for your information is the site selection criteria that we're looking at for that new cemetery. And just seeing whether there's any feedback around that as well. So happy to answer questions, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Do we have any questions, comments, moving? Councillor Marling and then Councillor Dale, and then Councillor McKenzie.
We've had our first meeting and it went quite well. And we've got practical people from Nelson City on it, which is always handy.
Just a reminder that the media may be present.
So practical people, and I'm sure we'll come up with a suitable solution. But there are constraints like water tables and things like that. So, and slope. So I'm sure it will take some time, but we'll get there.
So you happy to move the resolution? Okay, so moved. Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, I'm happy to second. It's quite amazing to see the water level thing. We buried my auntie in Invercargill about 12 years ago, and we actually had concrete blocks to put on the coffin to stop it from floating.
Yeah.
So,
Can be a problem in
it's
some
good to see it's
cemeteries.
being addressed up here, hopefully.
Councillor McKenzie, then Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much through the chair. Two questions. One in relation to the criteria. Criteria 3, location is not classified as highly productive land. And then we talk about class A, B, C, D. I just wanted to check that, I'm recalling previous discussions where there are different methods of classifying land. I'm wanting to check that that is the method based on a scientific approach as to, what's deemed to be productive land or not. I'm just kind of really wanting one source of the truth in terms of how we refer to productive land. So that clarification on that is my first question. And then my second question just relates to the termination clause in the agreement. So basically, this can be terminated by resolution of either council giving 1 month's notice of termination. So then I'm thinking, have we thought about what would cause a termination and what would death and what would happen if in actual fact we were partway through? And I mean, it just seemed a little bit, I was taken aback by that. So I'd be interested in your comment, Richard.
Okay, so I'll deal with them in the order that they were raised. So the productive land, I understand that the 4 categories there that are listed in those criteria are the ones that we use in our TRMP, though. Dennis may be able to confirm that, but I saw Barry here earlier, but he's not here now. But I'm pretty sure because Nelson City, I know when we discussed it, didn't have a similar sort of criteria. They had a much simpler one because of the nature of their area. So I'm pretty sure this is the one that was taken from the TRMP. Do you know? No.
I don't know the answer, but we would be consistent, I'm sure.
If we could just get confirmation of that.
I can confirm that, yeah. And then to the second one, in terms of the termination clause, I guess most MOUs do have some termination clause in them. And I guess that 1 month's notice of termination, it's by following resolution. So, I guess we need to have it, but I don't know what. I guess it'd be useful to understand more what your concern is around that, I suppose.
Yes, well, through the chair, I guess my concern would be that there's a problem that needs to be solved, more pressing potentially for Tasman than for Nelson, but and so we're working together as councils in order to solve that problem. If in actual fact, say hypothetically, Nelson just said, oh no, well, we're going to go alone and give you 1 month's notice, and then we're part way through thinking about a joint project, I mean, perhaps we could be left out of pocket or...
I guess to try and address it, it is a risk, but there is also underneath that you'll see the disputes provision as well. So I guess if there was, it depends how it arises, I suppose, but if it came up through some sort of dispute about how we were wanting to move forward versus the way they wanted to move forward or something, then hopefully we would get round the table and try and resolve it that way first before we invoke the termination provision. I think that should be a last resort.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Dowler.
I remember one of our TEP workshops, we had a lady here that explained the ABC and D land. It was to do with rural one land only. It was highly productive for farming, was rural one, and it had hilly. That could be the D or whatever, where you couldn't do anything with it, but the A was flat ground that you could. That was my recollection of what that was there. And the other, sorry, I missed it before, but the other thing was with the iwi situation. We have a Maori only cemetery in Motueka. I don't know whether that's been part of the discussion of whether they want to, whatever, but just thought I'd mention that anyway, because not many people are aware of it.
Thank you for that. I note that comment. There is an iwi rep to be appointed for this working group, and we're just waiting appointment of the person. Yeah.
My apologies, Councillor Butler. I forgot about you out there on the screen.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. Through the chair, I know it's tricky when I'm the only one who's Zooming today, and Councillor Hill's involved with things at the marae where there is no reception. So she has asked me to just following along from the previous comment. She's asked me to just raise an issue about the criteria. And there isn't a specific criteria of wāhi tapu, and the closest thing to it is the one about land is able to be developed as a cemetery. The site is not unduly restricted by significant ecological, cultural, or archaeological values. So I think she's happy to take that offline, but it would be good to get a clarification of the process, given that an iwi appointment has just been made in relation to that criteria, which appears to be missing or not recognised enough. Thanks.
Thank you. Barry, are you able to respond, or you want to take it offline?
I think that it's certainly
Richard, what did I say, Barry? That's my apologies.
Sorry, the constraint there, or the criteria there is one of the secondary criteria is the land is able to be developed as a cemetery, and it picks up those sort of cultural values. So I think wāhi tapu would be picked up under that value. And I guess that's the advantage. One of the advantages of having an iwi rep on that group is that they can, be fully involved in the discussion and ensure those considerations are, or those matters are properly considered.
Thank you. Councillor Tufnell.
Yeah, of course, when we start talking about the iwi, which brings me to think in terms, and no doubt will be part of the equation. I mean, we have other religious bodies, Muslims, etc., and I'm not sure, but I understand that some of these different ethnic groups require separation. So I'm not quite sure how we deal with that at this stage, but we obviously need to be aware of it.
Richard, why I keep calling you Barry?
Yes, certainly those needs, they will, once we get through that initial selection, we have some sites, there'd be some wider consultation as part of the development of the business case. So then those other groups and other needs will be taken into account.
No further comments. The resolution's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion before I put it? It's on the screen and in your agenda. If not, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, the resolution is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Richard. We'll move on to the next item, which is the Golden Bay High School Innovative Streets Project. Jamie, councillors, it's on page 21.
Good morning, councillors. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to take the report as read. I've got Mike Van Enter available as well to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
So just one initially from myself. So this was what was originally put up and it's been there the whole time. Is that correct? We haven't changed it in that time.
That's correct. So the trial layout that is still present on site is the one that the Golden Bay Community Board have now decided to support. Yep. So that's the one we want to make permanent. And the school are very strongly supportive. The school were really disappointed that the Community Board had previously preferred an alternative option. So I think everybody is largely pleased with the final outcome, and we do consider this the final outcome.
Thank you. So it's open for moving, commenting or questions. I agree to Councillor Butler first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to move this. I think it's a good outcome, and I think it did actually take a bit of time to bed in. And there was just a wee bit of a glitch because the Board of Trustees somehow weren't included in the, in the final round of comments. So I think the fact that the Board of Trustees is very, very supportive of the way that it is now, I'd like to congratulate the staff for sticking with this and doing a really good job. And it's great that the Community Board actually did a turnaround on this, and that was as a result of a site visit. So, yep, I'm happy to move.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Mackenzie, do you want to speak? Any further speakers to the? So that looks like it's pretty straightforward. If there's no comments, questions, I will put the resolution, which again is on the board and on page 20 of the agenda. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Resolution is carried. At this rate, we'll be home by lunch. Good luck with that thought, Stuart.
Kia ora, councillors. I think that most of you might be aware of this issue already because we've already discussed it. So on that basis, Mr. Chair, are you happy to take the report as read?
Thank you. Do we have anyone happy to move? Was it not on? Sorry. So I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, the resolution is carried. Thank you very much, Elaine.
Thank
That
you.
was easy. Move on to the Chair's report, which is on page 32. And we'll take that as read. I just will say that Councillor Turley and myself, I've got that article from the Farmers Weekly about the Freight Summit, and we're having a further regional chairs meeting, read that and pathway forward on this coming Monday with their chairs across and deputies across the South Island. Other than that, yeah, it's good to see the work the Alliance has been doing around the district as in paragraph 1 and continues to do to both in road rehabilitation and maintenance, and also the rivers team. They've still got lots of work on, and we'll have some further questions when we get to the operations. But it's an opportunity for anyone to make comment or raise any matters they wish to. Councillor Mackenzie.
Lovely photograph of you there, Mr. Chairman, in that news article. I wanted to read it, but actually I couldn't read it on Diligent because it was a little bit blurry. And I'm wondering if you could maybe just maybe give us a little brief overview of what you're trying to achieve here with this the summit and what it's actually about, because I don't know.
Okay, well, the summit is, as I say, and it was a number of organisations that are involved with freight movement throughout the South Island, like Kiwi Rail and others. Some of it was in relation to mode shift and gas emissions reductions. There was quite a lot of focus on the southern half of the South Island where there is much more opportunity to get mode shift that Councillor Marling talks about, where they can get logs and milk off road and onto rail. And Kiwi Rail was investing a lot of money in new locomotives that are much more efficient than the old smoky ones they've had previously for this mode shift, and I guess somewhat for the new ferries that will come in time as well. And also it's a lobby group, and this is something we will discuss on Monday, is how we gain more traction as a lobby group, being all of the regional unitaries across the South Island. So, yeah, but I'll see if we can find a way. I think I've still got the original, or someone has, that we can get the article to you, so because it's quite a lot more detail than I've got time to go into now.
So there's no one's lobbying for rail to be reintroduced into Te Tauihu.
I did see someone, but not in that forum, obviously, but I have seen that in the public arena. Yeah. Mayor Tim.
Yeah, I think the investment in rail obviously doesn't really support our region. And as I guess everyone's aware, there's some huge challenges at the moment logistically around shipping particularly, which is our key form of, I guess, moving large amounts of freight from here to other parts of the country and the rest of the world. So I guess the question is, how much discussion, or was there any, about coastal shipping? And is that going to form?
There was quite a bit of discussion around, and that's the trouble when you give a briefing on the fly. I missed the coastal shipping, and there was quite a lot of discussion, particularly around larger ports, as you'd be aware, Littleton particularly, and coastal shipping taking freight off road as well, and is able to move freight quite efficiently in relation to cost. Yeah.
Yeah, so for our region, coastal shipping is probably a more likely opportunity than the reintroduction of rail. And it's something I think we definitely need to be part of pushing, because there is a huge investment in roads and rail, but minimal to zero investment in coastal shipping. So.
Yeah, and particularly in Canterbury, there was quite a discussion around that because of the situation at Port of Littleton, where they are restricted about land, and there was also talk of a marshalling area at Ashburton, a super yard for marshalling freight onto trains to go up to Christchurch and Littleton.
Right, all good. Thanks.
Cheers. Councillor Turley and then Councillor Dowler.
Yes, thank you. It was a good discussion that was had by the group, but I think the elephant in the room for us remains the intersection, Gladstone Road and Queen Street intersection. And so that's a real problem that needs to be solved to enable coastal shipping to be more effective for us. And the other thing I was going to say is the website farmersweekly.co.nz. Brian? Up it will come. You can read it clearly.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. I remember about 5 years ago, I spoke with NZTA at the time, now Waka Kotahi, about the possibility of a railhead over just near Blenheim, because we still have all our milk tankers driving from Golden Bay to Temuka. And in some places, I understand that they actually have tankers on trucks that they can lift off and put onto a railway wagon, and away it goes. And the other fear that has passed at the moment, but could be rearing its head again in the future, is that if we don't do something with the port here to allow bigger ships to come in, i.e. dredging it deeper to allow the bigger draft, we're going to lose the container lines, which means all the fruit, pears, everything will be transported by road to Christchurch. So it's quite a fear there, and that's right current. Our cool stores are bulging over in our town at the moment. In fact, more than bulging, and they're using reefer boats to take kiwi fruit, which is not the best, but they're doing it to get the fruit gone. And a comment from one of the orchards the other day was, well, dig the bloody port out, mate, and let the boats come in and we'll be sweet or sweeter. Not. And I said, well, unfortunately, we've got resource consents and things to do before you start digging sand out. So, but the other thing that I haven't heard much more of a conversation, but there was I understand an overseas company was going to buy out Bluebridge. I don't know whether that ever went through or not. I just wondered what effect that'll have on the situation later on if it does come true. It won't be New Zealand owned anymore, so that can make a difference.
And the other reason, particularly in the south, around getting more freight onto rail, particularly was because of the availability of drivers and trucks going forward. Yes, I think it's a figure like 1,400 extra will be required over time. So that's quite an impact on the roading network, as you can imagine. Councillor Tufnell, then I'll come to you, Tim. Mayor Tim.
Yeah, I do recall many years ago, of course, we did have a thing that was delightfully known as Notional Railway between here and Blenheim. I mean, if push comes to shove, maybe we even have to try and look at that on a temporary basis till we get something better going at the port.
Thank you. Mayor Tim?
Yeah, as much as it sounds like an attractive option just to dig out the port, and it's not quite that simple. As Barry mentioned, obviously there's consenting issues, but there's just the actual cost. Like it's been looked at several times, and it's multiple tens of millions. And it's not just dredging; you've got to build bigger wharves to take bigger ships, and that comes at multiple tens of millions as well. So, realistically, effective feeder servicing and being a regional port that connects with a Tauranga or a Littleton for overseas calls is far more likely in the short term, medium term to be a feasible option. But without it, as Barry points out, at the moment I was talking to the Motueka Fruit Growers Association guy yesterday, and they've got massive challenges around cool storing and ship calls and availability of refrigerated containers, slots, etc. So it is a huge issue, but I don't think we should give the impression that that taking bigger ships in Nelson is, in the short to medium term, a viable option, because from my experience, it just isn't.
Yeah, I think the discussion from the forum, Mayor Tim, was that ports like Nelson would continue with current size shipping, but take the freight to likes of Littleton or Tauranga for loading onto much bigger ships to go overseas, where they have the infrastructure for that. So yeah, Robin's going to see if we can get that article out to you. With that, if anyone with a mind to move or anything further, move Councillor Marling. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Turley. No further discussion. I'll put the resolution that the chair's report be received. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Move on to what's next is Free Waters update, Richard. Sure you're looking forward to that. You didn't have a good start when you spilled some water over form this morning.
It's probably full of coffee. Yeah, I'll take the report as read. You'll note there's been a few changes over the last couple of months. Probably the greatest change is the ownership structure of the water entities, where it's going to be calculated on the basis of the population of the district councils. So we end up, and it's 1 share per 50,000, so we end up with 2 shares. Entity C has a total of 36 shares, the largest contributor being Wellington with, I think it's 6 shares. So, but most of the councils are either 1 or 2 shares. Yeah, so, but that's the major change. Otherwise, open for questions.
One of the key issues earlier was the separation and the debt transferring through. So with you becoming an owner, obviously the debt will still go away, because that was one of the issues.
Yes.
So the debt sits with the entity, not with the council.
The debt, and with the Three Waters, any debt at this stage is envisaged it'll be transferred through to the entity C in this case, yes.
question from myself. I'll carry on with it. At Farmers Weekly yesterday, there was someone advocating that the smaller rural supplies should not be in the entities. And then I think there was a Masterton District Councillor commented along the similar. Is that likely to gain any traction, or is that unlikely to happen for smaller suppliers of 2 or 3 tanks to be taken out? There's still people obviously advocating for that.
I mean, at the moment, if you are supplying more than your house, you are classed as a supplier. Taumata Arawai are the ones that are going to be policing that. And Bill Bayfield has certainly said that that's what the current regulations are. Whether that changes later, I think the feeling was there was only going to be about 70,000 odd properties in that space. But I think those of us in the know probably think it's probably heading up towards the more 300,000-400,000, maybe 500,000 across the country. But Bill Bayfield is aware of that. I have to say that he did make the comment that he didn't see that as much a priority as dealing with the larger populations and making sure there was safe water to the larger populations being supplied by water. So, yep, but nothing's changed in respect of this one house supplying another.
Thank you, through the chair. Just 2 questions. Firstly, under paragraph 3.5, we talk about making submissions when the Water Services Entities Bill is referred to the Select Committee. And I guess, it's got an unfinished sentence in here, but aside from that, I'm just wanting to understand a little bit more about what our approach is going to be in terms of consulting with our community, because, you know, I think we have to be quite careful. I mean, some councils up and down the country have already done some kind of survey or something. What is the nature of this consultation? What's the purpose of it? And how are we going to go about doing it?
I think our view at this stage, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a government initiative. It's not a council initiative. Council does have legal obligations. It can't divest its water supplies of its own accord without going through a form of public consultation. I think the consultation we're talking about is probably better informing our community, providing information for them to comment. At this stage, we are preparing a documentation to go out. Visiting, we're likely to go out in June when the bill goes before the Select Committee. And it may be that we draft up a draft submission from this council and ask the community to comment on it. That's one of the options that we have been considering, but certainly we want to go out and with some information. But we'll be, as a council, we'll be treated exactly the same as any individual as far as the Select Committee is concerned. So anybody within the district can put their submissions in. We can put one in and outline that we've had some community feedback, and ours is a kind of a collective submission. That's the intention that we're looking at the moment. But certainly get the information out there. I have to say there's probably a lot of ill-informed comment within in the community at the moment. And I know my presentation to a group on Monday night, I had a lot of feedback along the lines of, I understand a lot more now. And it's great to have this information and fully understand what the issues are rather than hearing of ill-informed information and comments made.
If I may, so there was something in all of that I didn't quite understand. So right at the start, you said that, you know, our water assets are, you know, strategic assets. And so we can't do anything with them unless we consult with our community. But actually, if the government's passed legislation, then surely that's the overarching power, not us engaging with the community.
Yeah, and this is where the word consultation, I think, can actually be misconstrued, because we're actually consulting to divest, because we're not divesting. We're actually wanting to get feedback from our community, is probably a better way of saying it, on what the government is proposing, and also feedback to help inform any submission that we put into the government on on the community's views in regard to the proposal. So I don't know if that helps. So when you use the word consultation under the Local Government Act, it's almost like we're going to consult so that we can help make a decision. I mean, this stage, the decision's out of our hands. The only decision we can make is our comment around the government's proposal. That's the only comment we can make.
So probably would be best not to use the word consultation.
Probably best. And yep, that's true. And my apologies for 3.5 without finishing that sentence off. Probably undertake some sort of public feedback. I think I probably have the word in there. Yeah.
Thank you. And if I may, with Mr. Chair, with my other question, the regional representation group. So I'm not completely clear how many people would be on that group. And then I'm not completely clear as to how particularly the local councils representatives, how they actually get on there. So could you just explain that a little bit more, please?
At our meeting, operations meeting, I think on the 31st, I did a paper on the Three Waters, and I did outline who the membership of that committee was. And from my recollection, there was about 8, 9 or 10, and they were mainly mayors from around the country that were involved in that regional. Is that the one you're talking about?
I think what Councillor is about the actual group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that one?
Yeah. The regional representation group.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that one hasn't been pulled together yet.
Isn't it going to be a mix of local government, iwi, and
at the moment, there's going to be 22 representatives on that from local government with an entity C, so one representative from each council, and then there's going to be 20 iwi representatives on 22 iwi representatives, one again from each council. So it's going to be a regional reference group of 44 people. So yeah, the governance aspects of 44 people across entity C, and that's one of the challenges I think that we need to comment on to the government is that it's almost getting to a point where there's whether you're going to get consensus across 44 people in a certain area with the water services entities, and whether you're just going to end up with a whole lot of divide and rule and end up in a real train smash, I call it. So I think that aspect of it is quite difficult. One of the recommendations that the regional committee put together was to have sub-regional groups that feed into that regional reference group. So in other words, we'll probably have one for Tasman and Nelson and one maybe for Marlborough, but then again, you're creating a whole lot more governance churn, I would describe it as. And I'm not sure that's going to be particularly helpful in the long run, because I think all 22 councils probably want to have a say about what happens with their assets, and we may be reading more into it than perhaps needs to be in terms of delivery of service, because at the end of the day, pipes still got to be fixed, pipes still have to be replaced, treatment plants still have to be operated and the like. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Turley, were you still wanting to speak?
Well, it was really around what Christine has asked as well, but I'm just wondering, when we go out to consultation, if we get to that stage, will Mana Whenua be involved with that? Because questions will come in that probably they're in a better position to answer. And I'm just wondering, they did show some preference to working with Ngāi Tahu when they came and spoke to us last time. And yeah, I'm just, is there the capacity and capability to engage in this process so that we can get consensus, or are we going to move forward into this situation where there's a lot of differing viewpoints? And yeah, I know it's a hard question for you to ask, but I think, yeah, I'm just wondering, have we had any feedback from iwi about where they're at with all this?
At the moment, the National Transition Unit are having the discussions with iwi across the country, and I'm not aware of their specific discussions with any of our 8 or 9 iwi. I know they've had a lot of discussions with Ngāi Tahu, and it's probably fair to say that there has been confirmation that our territorial border, the southern part of us and Marlborough, is still staying within Entity D. So we've had confirmation of that, albeit they've said that the levels of service or the service delivery might come from Entity C, in that case from the Tasman side. So it'll be a situation where Entity T will be paying for us to deliver the services to Murchison and Light, for instance. But as far as the consultation, it's a very difficult space, because I go back to my comment before. We're not making a decision here. We're actually providing community feedback. And so at what point do we involve our iwi and cut across what NTU are trying to do to get across what their decision is? So, I mean, I'm all for involving you if we can, but it's probably not an easy thing to say, listen, we need you. And again, it's the word consultation again. We're not making a decision. All we're doing is providing feedback. So whether involved in iwi and providing that feedback, I'm open to that idea. We haven't actually considered that at this point, but we could.
I'll go to Mayor Tim next, because I think he's got to get away for so. Mayor Tim.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is consultation with iwi of Te Tauihu. There has been a lot of discussion between the transition unit and DIA and Ngāi Tahu. But my understanding is that conversation with Te Tauihu is ongoing. I think Rich has outlined what the situation kind of looks like it's going to be with the boundary, i.e. the Ngāi Tahu Takiwā boundary is likely to be the boundary, and then there'll be arrangements or agreements in place about how the services are provided across that boundary. So I think we do need to steer clear of the consultation. It's really going out with information and getting people's feedback. So it's, I guess, more communication than consultation. And we're probably going to need to provide the council's view as well as providing the feedback that we get, and encouraging people to put in their own submissions to the select committee at whatever point in time that eventuates. But I suspect a lot of people are going to look at it and go, well, the government's announced that the decision has been taken. So, and they've announced that they've accepted some of the recommendations of the working group, despite the fact, in my view, they really changed nothing significant in the proposal. So, people may, I guess, look at it and go, well, what's the point in making a submission? So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But we just need to get out, communicate the situation as it is, how it affects us, what the pluses and minuses are, take the feedback, and then provide both a summary, I guess, of the feedback we receive, as well as our view of what might need to be done to get the very best out of the proposal for our region and ratepayers and residents.
Thank you. Councillor Ogilvie.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm referring to page 20, sorry, page 30, oh, I've lost it there. Page 36, it's item 3.23. And this relates to the Te Mana OTY requirements. Because though we've talked about Te Mata ROI, I think sometimes the demands requiring, or the principles of Te Mana OTY may be more concerning and more in need of requirements and specifics than we've talked so far. For example, in 3.23, it says, for the purposes of Three Water Service Delivery Reform, Te Mana OTY encompasses the interconnection with and the health and well-being of all water bodies that are affected by the Three Water system. And that's a very wide-ranging requirement. And some of the we need to actually have some of those principles or objectives or similar, I think, defined very clearly. For example, yesterday with the Catchment Management Plan panel hearing, there was, I think both Brent Maru and myself mentioned the contamination from car parks into water channels has to be controlled and basically stopped. Cattle which graze alongside streams, particularly in stormwater areas like in Motueka or perhaps even in Richmond, Wakefield, Mapua, has to be fenced. So these are, and one of the other requirements was, I'll write it down somewhere, all developments have to be water sensitive. Now, trying to define what is meant by that is important. It's important for the FDS. Pip and I are on the panel, and yourself, Mr. Chair, and the requirements of Te Mana o Te Wai for the FDS will be quite vital in terms of what decisions are made from that panel towards the councils. So I'm just trying to raise the point, and perhaps Richard may want to comment. Where do we go with ourselves as a council defining and designing principles, determining terms, conditions arising from the requirements of Te Mana o Te Wai? It's quite wide-ranging, in my opinion.
Richard?
When I look at what the Te Mana o Te Wai principles are, they align very strongly with what our endeavours are at the moment in terms of protecting the environment. Te Mana o Te Wai, the first principle is the protection of the water itself in the natural environment. The second one is the impact of that water in the natural environment. And the third one is where people impact that water. That's the third leg to it. So what the three waters is about is largely to protect the water in the environment and the environment itself. What we do to people and providing them with water and taking the stormwater and the wastewater, we've got to have regard for that water and that environment. So what we have been trying to achieve with the resource consents and the like and the impacts and effects of all our discharges across the district over the last, well, since the RMA was put in place, aligns, from my view, aligns quite perfectly with what Te Mana o Te Wai is talking about. It's just taking it to another level and giving, rather than treating water as a thing that we deal with, but actually respecting it a bit more. That it's not something that we just take advantage of, it's something we have to respect in itself. So that's how I view the Te Mana o Te Wai. As far as the water sensitive, we're doing water sensitive designs and development now, and that's largely related to stormwater runoff, so that there's some form of treatment, particularly sediment, pulling that out before it ends up in the waterways. In terms of car parks, roads, industrial areas that have chemicals that potentially may get into the waterways, that's all part of the discussion that if it's not with the council, it's going to be with water services entities to have arrangements with each of those, whether it's a road controlling authority, whether it's Transrail, whether it's individual industries, to have a discussion about how they manage their runoff and how they manage any contaminants with that runoff and how they deal with it before they're discharged into the environment. So that's all part of it. And in my view, it all lines in quite well with what Te Mana o Te Wai principles are.
And the cost impact of even the car parking requirements onto councils, because that, again, I mean, Queen Street is probably the worst example across our district in terms of trying to manage the vehicular contamination, as well as the car parks which align with, say, Queen Street. But let's say one of probably half a dozen in our district.
I don't doubt that there is going to be a cost with all of this, and there's going to have to be a point where there's I suppose, an optimum median about how far do you spend money to get to the last little bit. And I'm picking the Pareto principle come into it, that 20% of the effort might get 80% there, and I think that that's probably where we're going to be. I don't think we're going to get 100% pure water discharged everywhere. I mean, that may be the ultimate goal, but the cost of that may be just too prohibitive, and we might have to step back from that a bit. But you're right. The Queen Street, because we're so close to discharging, particularly to the marine area, there may be some interference or interception required at the stormwater discharge there to particularly collect sediments, and may even be we have other treatment plants or form of treatment plant to deal with the stormwater runoff. Particularly the first flush of a stormwater runoff, that's the one that's the most difficult. When there's been a lot of water and it's rinsed, most of the water coming off is pretty clear, but most evidence says that the first flush is the one that if you can try and capture and treat before you discharge is probably the way to go. So that sort of effort is something that's going to have to be done in the future. But yes, the dollars, there will be dollars attached to it, and how that's paid for has got to be worked out at some point.
Thank you, Councillor Nolan and Councillor Downer. Councillor Tufton.
Well, thanks for your report, Richard. I'm just interested in particular in our rural water supplies, because we've got three that are significant. And when you have a look at it, and the reading is acceptable solutions apply, which means treatment at end point. But whose responsibility will it be to make sure, one, that they're installed, and two, to monitor? Because we know that when we've been and people have inspected some of these, and I've got a close friend who does water filters, half of them don't work. They're not maintained. So it's fine to have a set of regulations, but you need an inspection and a set of standards that are actually done. And it does make sense because, you know, you don't have to treat stock water to the level that you do drinking water. So that makes some sense. And I remember we argued strongly, you and I, when we went to that select committee, but I don't think they heard that well, to be honest.
Look, there are 2 comments on that. The first one, I think the rural water supplies are probably, of all the water supplies, are going to benefit most by going in. As you know, 88, Valley and Dovedale are both in deficit at the moment, and they've got probably investment required. We're doing the water treatment plant. Fortunately, we got government money for that. But I think the rural water supplies are actually going to benefit from it. As far as the alternative supplies, Taumata Arawai have basically said the Water Services Act is that we have to provide safe drinking water to those that drink. And if that means that we have to, and it kind of, if you read it correctly, if we require the owners to put their own point of use of filters in, how can we guarantee that they're going to get safe drinking water unless we monitor and manage those point of use filters? So I think the reading there straight away is that if it's not the council, it'll be the water services entity that will operate and maintain those point of use filters for each of those houses.
Obviously, there's a cost to that, and if we have that everybody pays the same, it means someone's subsidising someone else.
And that's the case with the aggregation. I mean, the whole thing about the aggregation being bigger populations and is exactly that, is the cross subsidisation. So that's where I see the rural water supplies are actually going to win out of it. If you ring fence the actual costs of maintaining and operating probably 300 plus point of use filters in Dovedale, there's probably just about a full-time person just going around checking them all the time. So, I mean, there's a cost associated with that, but that's going to be part of the whole management of the water supplies in this whole area.
Yeah, just coming back to the management of stormwater off-site, back in the late 90s, I became manager of Gough and Hamer on the west coast with Caterpillar earth moving place, and we set up a new depot. It was about probably an acre altogether. But we ended up having to have a site discharge consent. We had a big water blasting pad, etc., that we used to clean the machines down before they came to the workshop. We had dirt area where second-hand machines, and everything had to go through this series of chambers. We had 5 chambers in a row, and the water coming out the end was pretty cool. We had to clean them every 6 months. We had to put a report into the council, rah, keep on. But the cost back then to us was just under $100,000 to install that system. So goodness knows what it's going to cost these days to do something similar if you're a big industrial place. Yeah, it worked, and it was great.
And my comment to that is that that's probably going to be coming back in those large industries that do have a lot of water, contaminated water leaving site. There is going to be an onus on them to either treat it themselves or pay the entity to treat it, and they have to do the cost benefit on that.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I sort of started off exactly where Councillor Mackenzie is, and find that it's not that clear for us or for the people at large. I think Councillor Ogilvy's made a very good point there insofar as that a lot of the things that we're doing now anyway as far are environmental, and so there is the concern that we have there is something that we are actually endeavouring to do in any case. The question really is for where we sit and where our ratepayers are, and how the little that we understand, and I'm quite sure that they understand a lot less than we even manage. So I'm very hesitant that we at this time trying to do any sort of submissions or consultations out there with the public at large until we actually have more information ourselves. So look, what we have got, and we should be telling the people at the moment where we are at. as a council, that we are following the instructions that are coming from central government. We are conscious of the fact that there is and has been a problem with water, but I think we just got to be a wee bit gentle on where we go as far as submissions or direct consultation at the moment, because I think we just end up with a big pile of stuff in front of us.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to move the resolution. I just do have one other question, just in terms of cross subsidisation. So for entity C, I mean, is every person who receives services, water or wastewater or whatever, across entity C, are they all going to pay the same amount? And how will that actually play out for our residents?
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. You're almost making me put my CE of Water Services Entity hat on, and I'm not. But what I can say to you is that the whole idea of this aggregation was to bring a level of cross subsidisation in. How that actually hits the road, I would hazard a guess, and that's subject to discussion with the entities and how they do it. But I would guess it'll be related to the quality of the service that you get. Like the rural water supplies, they get basically 80% or 85% of their water is basically treated water, but not disinfected, as it were, for their stock. And then they have the point of use filters. Now, the water service entity say, well, you've got a better level of service than everybody else because you've actually got your own water treatment plant in-house, so you're going to pay a little bit more. They may not. They may just say, listen, because you've got safe drinking water arriving just like somebody in Richmond, you pay the same. That discussion is still to be had. But how the actual costs hit the ground at this point in time and the costs that Water Industry Commission of Scotland have put together is harmonised across the whole of Entity C. And that's that $1,260, what they believe is per household by the time 2051 comes along. So it may actually be that that some areas are slightly varied to other areas, but yeah, that'll be something the Entity C will have to work through. And I'd imagine there'll be some discussions between the four entities to make sure there's a level of consistency across the country.
So in principle, it'll work, sorry to butt, like our water club, will it?
In principle, it'll be like our water club, exactly correct. Yep. Except much bigger. That's correct. Yep.
Would everybody not have to be metered, hypothetically, to make that system work?
And I tell you what, those councils that aren't metered, yep, they will be metered because you can't charge and manage what you don't measure. And some councils, and I know my previous council, Manawatu, don't have any meters. And as soon as we tried to introduce meters, the old privatisation word came in, even though we said from the water manager's perspective, we want to be able to manage where our water is and where the leaks are and everything. So I imagine that those councils, and there again, there may be a differential charge because they've come in without meters, and because of the cost of putting meters in, their water meter rate might be slightly higher than what ours is because we've already got meters. Those are the discussions that will be had within Entity C to see, listen, in those particular areas, you know, why should Richmond people who've already paid for their meters subsidise Manawatu to do theirs? Well, they may turn around and say, too bad, you all come in on level playing field. If you did invest before and you were good, sorry, you're going to pay double twice now. So, and Christchurch have had the same argument that Westland, they've upgraded all their systems. Why should now they start reinvesting in Westland and where they haven't invested? So those discussions are still to be had, and I'd imagine there'll be quite a bit of wailing and gnashing of teeth when those decisions are made.
Chairman, you come to the table for a reason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, I was actually going to just raise that water meter issue because it hadn't been mentioned yet. And because in terms of numbers of councils around the country, they've got water meters, it's only about half a dozen. But in terms of number of connections that are metered, because Auckland has them and Tauranga has them and Christchurch has them, although they don't charge by the meter, there's quite a large part of the population actually has meters. But yeah, there's a lot of councils out there that don't meter.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, we don't meter everything.
No.
We meter lots. But we don't meter everything.
We do meet, well, we have restrictors, which in effect limits the water use as well. Yeah.
That is needed. 1 unit per year. 1 unit a day or 2 units a day. Yeah, I'm happy to second. Yeah.
Right. I think the other thing to be aware is that we're one of the early adopters of metering, and so there's a lot of councils. That's going to be a big culture change for the end user. Comment or questions? I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you. The resolution is carried. I think now we'll go to Annette. So I see she's online for the Program Management Office to save her waiting all day. So Annette, would you be ready to speak to your report now? Yes, Annette, are you able to speak to your report for councillors, which is on page 145? Sorry to catch you on the hop like that. Just thought it'd save you waiting for a long time. We can't hear you though. Do we think you're on mute?
No.
No, she's unmuted, but we can't hear her.
We had this yesterday too, didn't we? With David. Oh, there's Cameron.
Annette, I think you might be on the wrong microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Waiting a minute helps, Richard.
Apologies.
Oh, no, sorry to catch you on the fly, but I just thought save you having to listen in for the rest of the morning. You'd perhaps like to present your report now.
Yes. I need to open it first, but I don't have anything to add. So I guess I'm ready for questioning for questions as soon as I've found it.
I'm happy to make a report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So that's Councillor Ogilvie. Do we have any questions for Annette around the report? That's on page 145.
I found it now.
Thanks. Not sure if there is going to be any questions. So Councillor Mailing has one.
Well, I'm happy to second. I just to comment that so many things we've been able to do because of this funding that we would never be able to afford otherwise, particularly in environmental and work and jobs of nature, the things around the estuary, and I'm thinking of Wilding Pines and things like that, that we would just never have got. So COVID might have brought us an awful lot of heartache and problems, and we've lost a lot of people, but it's actually given our district a real benefit, particularly in our environmental work. And the work in monitoring this has just been tremendous. And I just think of the Motueka stop banks as an example that we turned down around 2012 because of the cost, and the community didn't want to wear the cost. And now we've been able to do it and bring them up to a much better standard. So there's been a real benefit to our community, and I think that's underestimated at times.
Thank you. And Annette, could you perhaps just comment on how the Motueka Stop Bank project is progressing?
There are some minor issues with it. It's received an extension for 6 months to accommodate those. But I think overall it's going very well. I think there may be some performance issues. There was a delay due to a resource consent required. You may recall that. And it's currently in phase 2, and the project managers are working with the contractor to shape it up a bit. Phase 3 hasn't even been scoped yet. So yeah, I think overall it's going all right. There are always some issues with every contract.
For sure. Councillor Butler has a question.
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered about the Takaka Hill Biodiversity Group Wilding Pine project. Was that part of this, or was it, because I seem to think that it was, but I may be mistaken. I know that they did have funding to do all that wilding pine control that we can see has been happening up there. Was that on this list? Just an inquiry?
It is and it isn't. So they went ahead without the council and got the funding themselves.
Oh,
so they're responsible for it. So we're keeping a very loose, there's a project manager who keeps a loose eye on this project and works with them to help them along. But they've taken on full responsibility for delivering the funding. They actually received further funding because they're doing quite well. Yeah, so it's not really officially the council's responsibility anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And just a question from myself, and would you just like to give us a broad overview how you see it going? And obviously you have to continue in this role for a little bit longer.
Yes, so the 2/3 almost of all the projects will be finished at the end of June. So then what we're left with is the Motueka Stop Banks project, which is quite a large one at 10 million total, and another 7 environmental projects that go until 2026, some of them. They're kind of slow burners, so they don't spend a lot each year, but they're going quite well. And no doubt they'll deliver what they set out to deliver. Yeah, so that's my comment.
But yeah, like Councillor Bailey, it's been great for getting projects done that we wouldn't necessarily been able to do so early in the piece. So it's really been great. Are there any other comments or questions? If not, I'll put the resolution to receive the report, which was moved by Councillor Ogilvie, seconded by Councillor Nailing. All those in favour will say aye. To the contrary will say no. The resolution is carried. I think that's probably a good time for us to break for tea. And so we will adjourn to...
Yes, can I, just before you go, can I just introduce Matt Keys? He project minutes. So that means that we're going to deliver the capital program, eh, Russell?
Yeah. The development section before we go to community infrastructure. So that's libraries, community partnership and communications update this time. So we're going to start on page 133, which of those, Susan? Sorry, I haven't got to the page yet. That's why I'm asking. Libraries.
Sorry, if you, just maybe start with libraries and then we can move on to community partnerships and then communications. That would work out well.
Thank you, Glenys.
Thank you. Good morning. I'll take this as read, but I'll just add a couple of points. In the discussion about library collections and the issues we're having with supply of materials, we are still receiving a steady supply of library materials. It's just that they're taking longer to get to us, so we're having to plan well ahead. We're confident that we will meet our target of new items added during the year. Also, just wanted to add a little bit about the Motueka Library. I noted the increase in use of the library and library collections and visitor numbers and so on. I've also received some information about use of the community meeting room, and that's showing really good use by the community already. I think they were getting inquiries about the meeting room on the opening day, and as well as informal use, which is non-booked use and people just using the room. There have been in April and May, I think there's been 12 bookings, booked use for various meetings and community events. And I note the discussion about the Richmond Library opening hours, that we've actually been trialling that reduced Thursday night opening for a few months now. We moved to temporarily shorter hours due to COVID concerns and some staff shortages. We've had negligible customer reaction to that. So that just indicates to us that that later opening really isn't needed there.
Thank you. Happy to take questions of any. Councillor Tufnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's actually not a question, but I took the opportunity to go to the library in Motueka just recently, and it was brilliant. And the reaction from the staff when I went up and said who I was and what I was, they said they were so pleased at what we'd done, and they were extremely happy with their working environment. And well done, well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you very much. You know, I haven't been to the Motueka Library yet, but, you know, I love our Richmond Library. Just want to say that. Actually, but I do have a question under 4.6, Glenys, in your report. It says we now have an adult graphic novel collection located at Motueka Library. What is an adult graphic novel collection?
It's a fair point, a fair point. Look, some people might think of them as comics. They're not. They are stories told in that kind of comic book, perhaps graphic form. And we've had collections for children's and teens for quite some time, and they are very popular. We started a collection here in Richmond a couple of years ago. That's proven to be very popular, and we've put a new collection in Motueka.
Well, I'm very pleased that that's the explanation.
Yes.
Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, don't bother coming because otherwise you'll be jealous for a long, long time. Everything's gone pretty well with it. I was really impressed with the open day. Thanks for Susan getting my daughter from Australia in the door eventually. The Australian COVID thing wasn't recognised by the security people, but we got it there. And the comment I got back later on from her and the son-in-law was just, it was truly amazing. Just they live in a sort of semi-city over there, and the library doesn't come near it. That was their words. So yeah, no, really, really happy.
Oh, no, no further questions. Thanks very much, Glenys. Thanks for coming up the street. Who are we going to next? Chris, are we? Or Lane?
If you like, I'm happy to do Lani's for her. She's had to go to a meeting in Nelson. So I'll take Lani's section of the report as read, except I'll just make a comment about the first round of the COVID-19 grants, which is on paragraph 5.1 there. The grant subcommittee will be getting a report coming to them at the next meeting on the 1st of June. The grant has been extremely popular. We have $100,000, which the council has allocated over 3 funding rounds. We've had applications for $170,000 worth of funding just in round 1. So there obviously has been a real need for this. So the community is very grateful, and a lot of the applications note that and say that the council is filling in a gap that central government has left for community organisations like this, and they are extremely grateful to the council for having allocated the at least $100,000, the $100,000 for the applications. But you may find that it will all be allocated in the first round, and we won't be getting rounds 2 and 3 if that's what the grant subcommittee chooses to do. But so I just thought I'd give you that feedback. It's been very positively received by our community, and some of those groups that have done amazing jobs keeping people affected from COVID in our community going, and are very, very appreciative. That's the only comment I had to make. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Susan. It's interesting they're making the comment before we've even allocated the money. At least there's the opportunity. But is there an opportunity? Because I recall when we did that, there was a substantial amount of money in that grants account that had been carried forward over a number of years. Is there an opportunity to look at increasing that money again, or making it available, get some of that money available for another round perhaps? Because I'm reasonably confident that most of that 100K is possibly going to go in the first round.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there is a small amount of money still left in the fund and the surplus that was carried forward. what I would suggest that you do, if all the money is allocated in this funding round, then when you consider the carry forwards budget in September from the current financial year, that would be the time to make a call on whether you wish to allocate any further funding for that, because at least at that stage you'll know where you're finishing up for this current financial year, and the next funding round wasn't planned to be till later in the year anyway. So I think that's probably your opportunity is in September.
Excellent idea. Thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you. And if you don't know the answer, Susan, that's fine. Just one comment and then a question. In terms of events, I attended the Anzac service in Wakefield, and you know, I think that the council's support of Anzac services and the provision of the wreaths, it's so important. And, you know, the Wakefield service was hugely attended. It was a brilliant service. And so I just, you know, want to make the point that I hope that the council continues to support those services into the future. With respect to the Waiiti Dark Sky Reserve and talking about new infrastructure, what's the vision for that? What are we actually looking at putting in there? And are we working in conjunction with the Dark Sky group?
I would have to come back to you on that one. Lani did tell me, but it's completely gone out of my head. So what I can do is I can get back to you and email you after the meeting.
I thought we would be working with Ralph though.
Yeah, we're definitely working with Ralph, and I think off the top of my head, it's that it was provision of extra facilities for people to be able to view better in the evenings. But I'll confirm that and let you know.
Okay, because I mean, just a plug for the Dark Sky. Actually, I mean, it's amazing, you know, to see it out there in Waiiti. If you know, so great. Thank you.
Thank you. Appears to be no more questions relating to that, so we may as well move on to communications and media update, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Report brief but full, I'd like to think, and I'll take it as read, and any questions whatsoever are welcome.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? I did notice, and we've done this for Murchison a couple of times, we are using particularly Facebook as a medium for communicating messages. Do we make that known to the wider community or people that are new to Facebook?
Through Mr. Chair, it is one of the channels, and they are merely the information that is used in social media is often a repackage or a reshape for that specific audience of information that we're carrying elsewhere. One of our active campaigns is seeking entrance into local community Facebook pages.
Yeah, because they're a real growing trend.
And we find that is quite often we'll use our Facebook page as the source and we'll share to each of those different communities. So people don't have to be part of our community, so to speak, but we become part of theirs. We're finding that's becoming more effective. Obviously, some people go, "Oh, I don't want to be part of the council community," but I trust we're there and we're welcomed. We've had very, very little resistance, if at all, from these community sites. They see us as a good part of that. And it's quite interesting to note quite often conversations that are occurring, and you'll get every so often you get, "Come on, council, we know you're watching. What's your opinion, or what are you doing?"
Sometimes I have to,
which we will respond to when we know it's there. Just on the back of that, one of the things that I will bring to people's attention is that even though our current list of followers on Facebook is listed as 9,534, I just remind us that is to an IP address. Now, that IP address is one house or one business, so could in fact occupy at least another 3 or 4 people that gain access to that channel. So I'm thinking we're probably at least double that number of active participants that use that channel as their medium to communicate with us. So it is, as you say, Councillor, growing.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, is someone prepared to move the report? I'm happy to move. Seconded, Councillor Ogilvie. No further discussion. All those in favour will say aye. Against, the resolution is carried. Thank you. Thank you, team. Richard, we can now move to community infrastructure, which will probably take a bit longer, and is starting review on page 45, councillors.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll note the number of new staff that we've had. We've introduced most of them today. Martin Brown will probably be in about 12 o'clock if the meeting's still going. He's had an appointment this morning, so we'll introduce you to him. But otherwise, that's all from my side of it, and we can move on to...
Nothing on health and safety you want to comment on?
Well, nothing on health and safety other than it's an ongoing program for us. I know Mike's team down is in their work. They're always having what they call toolbox sessions in the mornings to discuss safety around all their projects for both the roading and for the waters. Russell's team, one of the things that they do when they visit site all the time is make sure that the safety aspects are being covered off and no one's doing anything unsafe. So we're actually monitoring things pretty closely in that respect. So unless there's any questions on that, we can move on to the property services, which Nick, I think, is online.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you, Richard. Good morning, Nick. Yep. Yeah, if you'd like to cover off the property services, and that'd be appreciated.
Yep. Morning, Mr. Chair, through you. I take the report as read. Probably 4 or 5 items I probably need to discuss in a wee bit more detail. The property team with the strategic policy team are working on a policy for community leases. We have a lot of ongoing issues on what is a community lease and who should receive one. And so we're looking forward to getting that resolved. The bit of property between Queen Street and Berryfield Drive of NMIT is still a work in progress. Their lawyers have slowed things down considerably, but we hope to get it resolved this month. We reported at the last meeting that there was quite a big bill with our 13 residential properties to get them up to healthy home standard. That's turned out to be incorrect. There's only about another 2 or 3 houses where we need to do some work. Costs will be less than 20,000. Since then too, we've also established a contract with the rent shop, a 1-year contract, and we've also put a new manager in, working with a new manager at the rent shop. We are developing a better reporting system for properties so that we can track just how well we're getting through some of the issues, and so we hope to have that ready for the next meeting. And finally, we've engaged in a study looking at improving and basically optimizing how we use council's fleet. That's it. He Pata, any questions?
Thank you. Yeah, do we have any questions? Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Nick, through the chair. I was at a community meeting last week in Wakefield where somebody made the comment, when it rains inside the toy library as well. And I just wondered, Nick, is there any update on where we're at with the current state of the toy library? I know we talked about it the end of last year. Can you give me an update, please?
We've applied for some funding in the next financial year's budget to do a full upgrade, including the cladding, roof and interior. So that we should be ready to start that this summer.
Great,
but,
thank you.
But please, if there are issues with leaking or structure, if they could just give us a call as soon as possible and we'll get them fixed.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, councillor Tufton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nick, it will be very nice when 4.4 is finally dealt with, and what I'm referring to is the Berryfield intersection. Some things sort of just do go on a bit, don't they?
Yes.
Happy days.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you.
Oh, say, hang on a minute. There, way you go, Sheila. We'll come back to it.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, this may be just a little bit from left field, Nick, but I have had some inquiries about the property in Oxford Street that has currently got the Plunket rooms on it. Is that in your sphere, or have we got any plans for that property? It's just that apparently the maintenance is not great. Are the Plunket Society meant to be doing the maintenance, and are there plans for that property? I'm just thinking of the long-term future of, child services.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'll have to report back on that, Councillor Butler. I haven't seen any plans, and we haven't had any reports of maintenance issues. So once again, they probably need to come back to us if there are issues. But I'll report back this week.
Yeah. Okay. I can be in contact with you offline about that.
Yep, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Richard, you was going to comment about the Berryfields.
I was going to comment about Berryfields. Unfortunately, Jamie could probably confirm, but the funding for Berryfields from NZTA has been put off. So even if we get the land, so I suppose what I'm saying, there's no urgency, even though it's taking a long time to pull it together. Yeah.
I was aware of that. Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman, but I did sort of feel that it was probably time that the legal fraternity actually did get something finished.
Russell, did you have something further? Has Richard covered it, or did you have something?
Richard's pretty much covered it, because I had similar discussion with Jamie on just where it was at. Land will be purchased in the next weeks or months. Funding will be another 18 months away. Jamie has got more of a feel for that than me.
So, Nick, just a question from myself in relation to, you talked about the management. I take it was of council houses that we rent out, but now with the property shop, the rent shop. Who was that with previously, and why have you just gone for a 1-year contract? That seems quite short term in rental space.
I'm not sure. It was the rent shop took over the contract around about 2014 when they purchased another business. I'm not too sure of the details of that. We are, and they've never really had a contract with us. So we've put in place a 1-year contract, mainly because we're trialing commercial property management software at the moment. And if it works, there's no reason why we can't manage these properties in-house. It would save about $26,000 a year and pay for the software.
Right. Would that include like house inspections though? Because that is obviously quite a time consuming exercise.
Yes, it would.
Okay, thank you. Richard's use. Anything further on property? Okay, if not, we'll move to reserves and facilities. Thank you, Nick. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Just take this section of the report as read, just add a couple of points, or highlight a couple of points. So the first part there is around the reserves and facilities generally in the operational area. I suppose at the moment, this dry weather is now starting to hinder us a bit in terms of planting. So we've got a very big planting season this year with not only billion trees type projects, but also replanting in Kingsland and other areas. And so this continued dry weather is pushing that back, and hopefully we'll manage to get it completed. But we do need rain before we can really get into that. On the cottages side, you'll note there the Healthy Homes program in relation to the cottages is now almost complete, and we'll have that completed by the end of June this year on program. And there's also, we've instigated a driveway and car park seal renewal program within the cottages, which is spread over the next 3 or 4 years, a couple each year. And again, that work is, most of that's been completed for this year, apart from Taka, where we were waiting on the completion of the new units before we redid the driveway. The CapEx update is in attachment 1, and then there's 2 monthly reports for the Richmond Aquatic Centre for February and March, and they're in attachments 2 and 3. And they seem to be I loaded them up in the reverse order, so they actually March, then February. But anyway, I was happy to take any questions.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Richard, this refers to item on page 101, and this is the Goodman Recreation Park CapEx 295,000. The new project manager, I think, has replaced Gary. Can we have a meeting and just discuss the realities of that and the worthwhile nature of that, please? I mean, I've expressed this concern over time, but I think even now with our limited development, this is more a real concern than it was. The intention, for those who don't know, is to spend that 295,000 partly on a toilet, mostly on car parking on Goodman Recreation Park, which takes up quite a bit of the park itself. So my concern, and I've heard it from others just recently, do we need that park to be lost for car parking? So I'm just asking Richard, perhaps with the new person, is it Grant or Rob from his department who may look at that? And I thought just have a review of that policy or that project. So we can have some time over to you, Richard. I know the community board supports it, but I think we may need to go back to the community board and say, look, given our shortness of funds, we may need to review that particular policy, that project.
Right, Richard, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Chair. That project has 2 components. One's a new toilet facility, which is badly needed for that area, and the other is some car parking. The car parking proposed doesn't take out any of the field area. It goes along the edge of the field, so it doesn't impact on that, but does provide, again, some additional parking. That area, particularly in the winter months, gets extremely heavily used with the soccer fields there on the grassed area, and then netball and other activities in the rec centre on the adjoining car park area. So in my view, that's certainly well needed. Happy to have a discussion with Councillor Ogilvie outside the meeting, though, if he wants to discuss it.
Well, just
no worries about the toilet at all. It was just the car parking, which was asked about the other day when I was there with some footballers.
Right. Do we need to involve the other 2 councillors in that? Or? Yeah. Yeah.
I suggest going to the community board because they're all 3 of us there.
Right. Well, whether you have a discussion first here, because I imagine this was funded through reserve.
The RFCs.
It's the RFCs. So at the councillor level before you go to the community board. Councillor Turley, did you hear?
I was just wondering about the Brightwater Recreation Reserve completing the play equipment there. I see it was delivered in October. It seems to be a long time just getting in situ.
Is that the coach place reserve?
No,
that's a different one, is it?
Rec Reserve at Brightwater.
Right, that the main one you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So through you, Chair, there's quite a lot of program equipment in the program for this current financial year. We have had a lot of delays waiting for equipment, and then it arrived about the time that the officer was doing that work left, and so we've some of that equipment that we have received now, most of it will be in place before the end of June. And I think there was only a couple of items for the rec reserve, and the coach place is a bigger piece of work, and that one will be moved out into next financial year now.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you very much through the chair. I would just like under reserves and facilities update to make a couple of comments about Wakefield. Firstly, I just want to mention that recently Doug South passed away, and Doug was the president of the Wakefield Bush Restoration Society, who actually have a formal memorandum of understanding with the council to undertake work in Edward Bagent Reserve, Robson's Reserve and Faulkner's Bush. And Doug and his team of workers have done a magnificent job actually in Wakefield, and I wanted to acknowledge his passing, and we'll need to continue to maintain our relationship with that society going forward. I also just wanted to, I don't think it rains more in Wakefield than anywhere else, but not only does the toy library leak, but actually the hall leaks as well. And I think this is quite a difficult issue for the local community to get their head around, because you know, do you spend $20,000 on actually trying to do some remedial work to a hall which actually is no longer fit for purpose and doesn't meet the needs of the community, versus actually can we accelerate our plans in terms of deciding what Brightwater and Wakefield need for their communities going forward. And so I'm just wondering, Richard, how do you think we can get to a point where the community actually can make a sensible decision about spending money on the hall, as opposed to putting their efforts into looking to the future and providing fit for purpose facilities?
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair, I'll have a go at that one. So I suppose there's two elements to this. One is the existing hall committee. So the hall committee who look after the current Wakefield Hall is a subcommittee or a committee of the Community Association, which is quite different to most of our other halls, where they have an elected committee elected every 3 years. Just after the council elections, and so that committee works with our team on the maintenance program for that building. I know with the leaks, there has been some debate about how much the building is leaking or isn't leaking, and I think as some of it seems to be condensation that's building up on the inside parts of the building and so on. So, but we will work with that committee to keep that building in an operable state and weathertight until you know, a new facility is in place. With the new facility, there is in the LTP, as councillors would be aware, a facility place for for Brightwater and Wakefield, and I think it's out in about year 5 or 6 of the plan. And a group has been established recently within, mainly made up of Wakefield residents at this stage. They've been trying to encourage Brightwater to provide some people to go onto that committee, and they're starting to push ahead and do some work around the new facility, and have prepared a bit of a brief around doing a needs assessment and so on, which is the first step in that process. So we've sort of got two parallel things going on, and we're sort of moving towards it. But I guess in the interim, it is quite hard to sort of keep the two things working so they're in harmony with one another. And there was a suggestion, I think, from the group at one stage that they could perhaps, the new group, the working group, that they could take over some of the function of the hall committee, but there was some debate, I think, again, within the community about whether that was a good idea or not, and whether that would take their eye off the ball in terms of giving them two different almost conflicting purposes. So that sort of more describes the current state rather than giving solutions. I'm sorry, but we are working through a process, and we will try and keep both things working along in parallel.
If I could, Mr. Chair, I just think that if we can provide as much support as possible that we can, to the community, so that we actually, can move forward at a reasonable pace. I think that's what I'd like to see.
Thank you. Just to refer from myself, just in relation, I'm sorry, my apologies. Just in relation to Coast Place Reserve, why is that off track? Is that staffing? Is it? I think you did respond in part to Councillor Turley.
Yes, that's a staffing issue. We need to basically prepare a new design for that reserve, and then take that to community, consult community on that, and then move ahead to get that ordered. And that hasn't been. It's been progressed a little bit, but it's not very far down the track yet.
Right. Then just in relation to the main report and your report, I'm just going back to just around the maintenance contractor is performing to the specified standard in most areas of the contract. Previously, and Councillor Maley and Tufnell, when we did that contract, we had, and it became Glenn that was monitoring it, and now Glenn's left. Is someone continuing in that role to do that? Because I'm just aware that contractors can take their eye off the ball if someone's not looking over their shoulder.
So we have been continuing to manage that contract. It's been spread across the team and in the gap. But now Grant will, who you met this morning, will be taking that role, and so he's just coming up to speed. He started this week. In the meantime, we've been continuing our audits and our contractor meetings and that sort of thing. So we are continuing to manage that contract.
With a drier autumn, they should have been able to keep within spec. I haven't heard too many complaints about grass length of late.
Yeah, they've been, like everybody else, they've been struck a bit with staff absences through through COVID, and also they had a mandatory vaccination, so they did lose some staff during that period, and so they've been recruiting to fill those gaps again.
Right, and then just in relation, in Murchison at the Sports Centre on Monday night, there was some talk about down there where they have a facility called the Axman Shed, where they're looking to do an upgrade to the skate park facilities, which is by and large ramps in there, which I think Yulia had talked to me about earlier in the day about, and there was general support. But that sort of did remind me, when will the RFC list come to councillors for consideration? Is that work in progress or?
It's work in progress, and so it's been pulled together at the moment, and that should come back through the next round of meetings. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions for Richard? If not, we'll move. Thank you, Richard. We'll move on to, I'm sure this is slightly out of program delivery. Russell, that's you. Normally you're later. You get to come earlier this time.
Thank you. I've got a few updates, but not many. The first one on my list of projects is the Taka Grandstand. There's a full report going to council next Thursday, which gives the background to where we're at with that. Construction is progressing well. We have some challenges with budgets due to some extensive replacement of structural elements, but I'll leave that for next Thursday. There was a mention about safety before. I'd just like to comment briefly on the Salisbury Road upgrade works, which are progressing well. Any of you have gone down that road, some of the councillors live in that direction. It's nice to see it is a safe site. The fencing's up, the signage is good. Kids and parents are able to get into school and out. There's been no disruption to business, and it's a good flow. And the contractor, Thornton Hogan, doing an excellent job of progressing that. So that's good to see, because it's sort of up front and centre with the large numbers of our community going down that area. There is a slight correction on one of my projects for River Survey. I thought one of my colleagues, Giles, had invented some new scientific word I didn't know about when I was questioning about his report, because he's got a word in there for River Survey, which is aerial surveys of our river network. which is important for planning purposes. It's funded out of our gravel extraction rate, so it doesn't cost council any direct money. We get that from our rivers fees. It's called crop progress. I might go, Giles, that's a new scientific word. I don't know that one. But it's actually a typo. It's supposed to say just progress. Just a correction there. Progress of data. It's not a new scientific word at all. Berryfield intersection, which has been covered, land will probably come our way sometime soon, but funding will be a bit further out. Stock banks, our biggest spend for the year at 4.6 million, is progressing well. Had a slightly delayed start with getting some consents and getting a large amount of material. There has been some discussions with MB about getting some social outcomes. And I'm very keen, in fact, now wishes to broaden the scope within the same budget, just allocating some of the engineering budget to some community outcomes about enhancements to the river and potentially getting some access to the river. We've got some discussions to have with iwi and the community at large before we finalise those. But they like what we're doing, and the project is progressing well. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Russell. Councillor Mayer.
Well, first of all, Russell, thanks for your report. And I'd just like to echo those comments about Fulton and Hogan and Salisbury Road. I'm cycling past it a couple of times a day. Last night, they even worked overnight because they did the main entrance to, the northern entrance to Waimea College by the lights. So they started about 7 o'clock, and I went past there this morning and they put the new pipe in, all filled in. So they're certainly steaming along. And I noted they did the painting in front of the intermediate overnight as well. So they're
very mindful of crossing for driveways and entranceways to do it outside of the times when people try and use them the most.
They're doing an outstanding job. And there is a lot of traffic on that road, but it's also pushing traffic to Hill Street as people take the alternative routes as well.
Thank you, Councillor Mayer. If I could just follow on there. So, Russell, I think we were scheduled for that work to be finished sometime in June originally. Is that date likely to be met?
Yeah, we're progressing well.
That's good. The other thing, I did have one call from a person down there, and they hadn't been notified about the work, but it transpired they had been renting their accommodation. So we only sent notices to the landowners. So
Yes.
they were.
We've got no way of finding out who rents. We only know who owns.
Yeah, so that's
and the owner's supposed to pass on notes to their tenants if there's some work going to be scheduled at the property.
Yeah, well, they hadn't. So I had to explain the whole process and how it happened, which is just one of those things that, did we put on the notice you should advise your tenants or something like that? Because this was like a block of units.
Yeah, well, normally we do mail drops so that hopefully the tenant actually gets it as well, but it actually gets addressed to the owner.
Landowner, yeah. So. Right.
Mail drop was quite wide this year because it went beyond just the main road.
Oh, yes. We can't remember the number. There was hundreds of notes that went out for the wider community. It's not just Salisbury Road, it's all those people who are going to connect to it in terms of their daily travel.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. Because, that's one of this person's concerns was the hours they're working. Well, I said the longer they work, the quicker it'll get done.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because they were concerned they were starting at 6 in the morning. I thought, well, that's about the time they should be starting.
We're very mindful of how busy it is, therefore speed is important to us.
Exactly, yeah. If there's no other questions, there is, Councillor Turley. I'll come back to my other one after you.
I'm not sure who can answer this, but I did put in a request for the end of Bryant Road where it meets the river there. The car park there is used a lot. It's on the cycle trail, and there's some really large potholes, a couple of them, and they're very close to the sealed pavement, and people biking sort of pull in there to stop.
That's probably a transportation one when we get to Jamie, I think, is it? Yeah, so.
I think there's a letter coming from the Community Association too. They're concerned about it. So, yeah. Sorry, I probably jumped my gun.
Yeah, you have a little, but do you want to answer it now, Jamie, or wait till we get to yours?
Oh, happy to answer it now. Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's actually on private property. So before we jump in and do anything, we just want to make sure that we have the rights and the ability to do something. So, yeah, it's not a simple answer. We're going to have to actually figure out what we can and can't and will and won't do there. So I can't answer it right now.
This health and safety thing, if someone flew in there on their bike, they could go over the handlebars if they were going a bit quick. Yeah, I'm not just sure where the boundaries are, so it's sort of hard to know. It's in front of that sign and it seemed to be on the road reserve. So I'll leave it to you.
It'd be best to just catch up directly on that.
So Russell, the other question I had was in relation to the Resource Recovery Centre at Murchison and the new weighbridge. Is the timeline still as you've got in the report, and what is the likely date that they'll be able to start using that facility?
To my knowledge, the timeline is the same as in the report. I know of no reason why we won't meet that.
And so will that change that everything that goes in there will be put over the weighbridge like Richmond is currently?
This is the best way is to weigh. There's no disputes on what goes in and how much you charge.
Yeah, sounds good. So do you think that'll be when we start that, as soon as the bridge is able to be used? Because just it'd be good to advise the community this is coming.
We will give you a note so we can go out to the community to make sure they know when they'll actually be operational.
That'd be great, thank you. And perhaps something in the Murchison newsletter or something like that. And the Facebook page. More seem to read that than the newsletter for some weird reason I haven't yet worked out. Anyway. What was that?
They're younger than you.
Yeah, well, that's probably true. So I'm just trying to see who's next. Who's next? Is it Mike? I'll just get there. Yeah, you, Mike. Water and waste.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next 61, councillors.
I'll take the report as read
Thanks,
as usual. And just a comment on page 3 of the graphs up front there. We're still maintaining quite a good record of blockages this year. We're about half of what we were at the same time last year. And interesting to note, since the last meeting, we've only had 6 blockages in the wastewater system, and only 1 of those were due to wipes. So the message is obviously getting out. It's very pleasing. Onto water supply. And so we've continued to have a few issues with tampering with our water systems. So this week we've drafted a letter which will go out next week to all contractors, landscapers, surveyors, developers, plumbers, drain layers, just advising of the water bylaw. And because the penalties for council and even for us as individuals, as staff, are pretty severe under the Water Services Act for any contamination. So we do deal with it very seriously now, and they'll be advised of their responsibilities and the fact that only a contractor is approved to work on the public network. That applies to water and wastewater. And we continue in the process now of prosecuting a company that had 2 illegal connections on a subdivision to our network where they used water. So we'll be going through the process, investigating that and decide whether we have a case for prosecution or not. So yes, that letter will go out next week. The Motueka treatment plant, understand it's very close to trial operation, and the Dovedale treatment plant. Russell probably cover this, or he actually.
Sorry, Mike, it's the water treatment plant in Motueka.
Yeah.
What did I say? Wastewater.
You just said treatment. It's operational.
Oh, water treatment plant. It's in the trial phase. Yeah.
Water's flowing.
Yep. So water's flowing there. The Dovedale treatment plant, water treatment plant, we commissioned next week, but we'll also connect that into the scheme and use it from there, because whatever state it's at, it's going to be suitably better than what the current water is going through the system. So we want to use that water as soon as possible. It's got the new Lamella filters there, and yep, they're looking quite good. Item 7.16, the National Performance Review. So this is something that we've done each year. We compare our performance for water, wastewater and stormwater against other councils. And on each of the following pages, there's a number of figures there. We've highlighted where Tasman sits in there. I'm not going to go through all of those. However, with the introduction of the Water Services Act, that is going to supersede the monitoring and reporting and performance reporting of our wastewater, water and drinking water, stormwater systems. So expect that this national performance rule will just fade out. We've been participating in this since, I think, for about the past 6 years now. My last comment is just under waste management and minimisation. There's been a supply issue with recycling crates. So we've managed to buy a few spares off Nelson City Council just to see us through for the next couple of months. So we can continue giving people crates for their recycling. And hopefully that'll come right after that time. That's all, Mr. Chair. Take any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor McKenzie.
Firstly, well done on your interview on national radio about our fatbergs and Stevens Bay. It was great. You managed to also get in clothing and other items that need to be retrieved. So that was good. My question is, so what is halo acetic acid that we've got in our Dovedale water supply, and how do we get that?
Okay, it's one of the issues with the turbidity of the water we have. So we've got THAs and HAAs, both sort of acetic acids, and we've got to monitor for them. And essentially they are disinfection byproducts from using chlorine. And when you have water that has high organic matter in it, it reacts with it and produces this byproduct, which is potentially carcinogenic. And so we have to make sure that we are below the maximum allowable values for it. And if we are at the maximum allowable value, we actually can't use the water. But if we're at up to half, then we need to monitor it annually until we reduce it. So the main purpose of the new filter is actually to filter out that turbidity from the water and make it clean enough that we can reduce the levels of chlorine that we need to apply or dose with.
Okay, so we put the chlorine in to treat the water, but a consequence of putting the chlorine in is that we get this other acidic reading, and then crikey.
Mr. Chairman, which is actually not a new thing. Can I say that when you go to a swimming pool and smell the chlorine, it's actually the chlorine methane has got the reaction with the organics that you're smelling, not the chlorine itself.
So just a question from myself, Mike, just in relation to the Dovedale water scheme, we went past there on the day we went to the opening of the Batten Bridge cycleway. That looks like a quantum leap forward from what it was previously. Is there any chance, I'm not sure Councillor McKenzie and myself who would probably be quite interested in visiting that, and maybe other councillors, any chance we could possibly have a visit at some time for those councillors that are interested?
Absolutely. We're actually, I'm trying to organise a visit at the moment for our Rural Water Committee for Dovedale as well, because they haven't had a chance to walk around. So yeah, absolutely, we should have a site visit up there. It's a significant change from previous. Yeah, as you know, the old plant is still sitting there on the edge of the bank that is frittering away.
Yeah, I just about drove over the road looking what's there now compared to what was there previously. Goodness me. Looks like we've jumped 3 centuries in one go. And just in relation to recycling, I'm not sure if this specifically covered in the report, but when does that contract come up for renewal around the recycling?
It is quite soon, but we've actually asked for an extension of up to 2 years to allow for all the legislation changes that are coming through, because it's going to have quite an impact on potentially on how we collect recycling, what is collected and where. So so we've actually just written very recently to the contractors and advised them of that.
I think it actually finishes June next year, doesn't it? The main smart contract, smart environmental. But was it last meeting, operations meeting, we asked for approval to extend it for another up to 2 years, so that we can actually get some certainty from the central government about what services we have to deliver.
because one of the things I've become aware of is that it is becoming quite challenging for the operators to do that with the increase in traffic and this damage occurring to the larger bins, particularly. I'm not sure if that's from the machine, the truck machine, or from passing traffic, but particularly on the main arterial roads, it must be quite challenging. I know Coastal Highway we've even stopped collecting in some of those areas. Is that likely to be an increasing problem as the traffic grows?
Yeah, both traffic volumes and speed are an issue. So where we can, we try and avoid the highways and the major roads.
Unfortunately, a lot of people living on some of those highways.
That's right. Yeah.
Councillor Butler. You're on mute.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, Mike, I know this has been raised before, but I've got a question about the Upper Takaka water scheme and, the potential or the imminent chlorination of that scheme, which I think, some members of the community up there are sort of querying the need for it. But my question relates to what you've just been talking about in your reply to Councillor Mackenzie's question about organic matter. So that supply comes from a stream, and there's a filter. Is there a chance that, that there could be a lot of organic matter in that water that would result in this problem of the acids and the chlorine taste, etc.? And is there a chance that that the filter in the UV system could possibly suffice there for that very small scheme?
No, I'll answer that last one first. It won't suffice because you have to have a residual chlorine or a residual disinfectant by means of chlorine in the water or water supplies. And this now also extends to water tankers. So when they deliver, they've actually got to prove there is a chlorine residual in the tankers when they deliver to a customer. So that's pretty much not negotiable unless you apply for some sort of exemption. But I think it'll be very hard to get that. But that it's only really Dovedale that we've had an issue with these THAs and HAAs because it gets particularly high turbidity there. Even 88 Valley that has turbidity issues from time to time is nowhere near as bad. So I'm not aware of any issues at Upper Takaka, and we have gone through all our schemes and done a test just to make sure that it's not an issue.
Right, okay, thanks very much.
Right, Mike, so I'm just trying to see where the gap is in your report, because it is around rivers and coastal. That's Jamie though, isn't it? It's Mike now. That's why there's no gap. Because I do have a question in relation to rivers. So, Mike, just in relation to the Marawea River, and of course you'll be aware of the flooding out there, and the Mayor and myself visited that. And just been a concern raised that we're restricted to 1,000 metres able to be extracted, where there's a need to get a huge, much more than 1,000 metres, which for those that don't know, that's not much more than a few bucketfuls, really. Yeah, no, 1,000 metres even. Yeah, 1,000 cubic metres. That's right. Yeah. So I just wondered if you had any comment about that, because obviously those farmers are still concerned about the impact from that flooding, which I think was back in July, and getting something done to alleviate the problem for the future.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through you. I'm not sure the specifics on that. I know at the moment they're taking a bit of a conservative approach where people have asked for gravels quite urgently. They've sort of limited to 1,000 cubes just to make some available. But once we've done all the assessments and so on, we should be in a position to allow more to be taken
Yeah, could perhaps talk to me offline about that, but.
Or
just
if you'd
wanted
like to have a chat to David Stevenson, he's done quite a bit of work in this area of late.
Okay.
Yeah, since Giles left. Yes, he's picked that up. Yeah.
And other than that, it's good to see the river work continue. And as I said in speaking to my chair's report earlier, but like the Mucha Pico, where the state highway was at risk, and it just seems that it seems to be pretty much ongoing. And I understand that the contractor has some staff shortages, but we're getting on top of it. That's I guess really the question in relation to those flood damaged events.
Yes, I mean, we've got a bit of an issue from time to time at the moment with getting rock, and we're working through that. We seem to be keeping on top of most of it. And we'll probably, some of the work will be carried over into next year just to try and spread the workload between the 2 years and make the best use of our resources. We've, in the past week or two, we've had a few issues with COVID with our contractors, and that's created a couple of challenges, yes.
Thank you. I think it's, Councillor Dale, you had your hand up.
Yeah, two questions, one from just before, but one just now. The 7.49, you presented a summary of the approach to gravel management and a meeting of the Motueka Collective. Did I miss something? Or what is the Motueka Collective?
Well, Mike, do you want to answer and I can help if you like? The Mott Collective is a group of people who are concerned about the river collectively.
Yeah.
There's a number of groups up and down the river. There's one at the Upper Mott where Joe Leyland and Roger May are the coordinators, and they've gathered information, and it all seems that there's funding available for projects to enhance the river and stuff like that. And so what they had was a Zoom meeting, which went really well. We had over 20 people on there, which is much better than we got at the River Care meeting last. So we'll probably look at doing that for the River Care or the River Care meetings. But it was mainly to talk about the issue of gravel. And of course, some of the people on there raised the issues that historically raised. But I must say the staff did respond very well, and in some cases under a little bit of pressure. So yeah, it was a really good outcome.
Right, no.
But yeah, it's all about sustainable farming funding as well. And if they have these collective, it makes it easier to get government funding. You might want to add a bit more if you know.
I think you've covered it. It's not an area of my expertise at this stage. I'm still learning about the rivers, but I think you've covered it pretty well, actually.
No, it's just be handy to be able to listen.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if that was recorded, but I think there's a group in the lower, and David might know, in the lower Mott, they had a meeting at Moochie earlier in the week, I think. Yeah. So perhaps we need a bit more communication around this. Look at the phases around the.
We have got a workshop set aside to discuss gravel work. In fact, we've been trying to hold it for the last month. It got cancelled previously due to time commitments. We were trying to get it done today, but that hasn't been arranged. So we are looking to find a place where we can have that workshop, probably about an hour and a half. Mike and David Stevenson have put together quite a good program, pulling all the information that Giles has done with all the flying, show where the volumes are and how we deal with it. So that workshop will be happening over the next month or so.
That's right. No,
but this collective's a different process to what Richard's saying.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's just be handy to hear what people say, like from different areas if you're involved in the same river, like upper to lower Mott.
And that's what that collective's very much about, and taking ownership of their area of the river and raising issues and doing plantings and stuff like that. It's they've had people from the North Island who've done this come and talk to them about how to do it and how to get the best out funding opportunities to enhance planting and on farm and in public areas and those sort of things. So it seems like a good idea, and there's some really passionate people who are driving it by and large.
No.
Yeah.
And just to wind it back.
Councillor Malin came out one night, the night of the back in earlier in the year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What were they talking about that night? I can't even remember now.
I don't know, but the interesting thing was the irrigators were a bit more concerned about the collective. So we didn't get as many irrigators that night as we normally do, but we've got more people from the collective. But it's about enhancing the river.
Yeah.
And there's a water conservation order on the Motueka River, and I spent a lot of time on it, with David's permission, of course. Because it's an outstanding river, and if we can do anything to enhance it, we should.
One online. Yeah. Sellers online. Yeah. Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, just my other question or comment is the recycling trucks. Yes, with the other vehicle parked up its backside, I think that's the second one we've had within a couple of years now. So I sort of came out of Motueka last night to come home, and there's a set of traffic lights being set up at 8 o'clock at night, and I thought, what's going on here? Anyway, down the road about another couple of k's, here they were looking at setting up another set of traffic lights, temporary ones, on the highway. And there's a road marking truck sitting there. And I'm thinking, they can abuse temporary traffic lights while they're remarking the road. Cool. That's probably okay, but yeah, a bit different than it was a few years ago. And today, just thinking about it here, I can see that we might have a ute about 300 or 400 yards behind a recycling truck with a flashing light with a sign on it, like they do with the lawnmowers, I suppose. Eventually, which is going to cost the ratepayers an absolute fortune. But if we keep getting rear-ended like we are, something's going to have to happen, eh? Just a comment. Thanks.
Councillor Butler, my apologies if you had your hand up for a while.
No, Mr. Chair, I haven't actually. Look, I wanted to ask a question. I'm just not sure where it fits into the report, but it's in relation to Liger Bay and the problem with the February flood, and the fact that the stream ended up cutting along the foreshore. And I'm just Councillor Hill and I would just like an update about, we understand that there may be a resource consent being applied for, but it would be quite good to see that project go on to the action sheet. So is someone able to just give us an update about what's happening there and what the plan is to try and remove it or redirect it from going along the foreshore to maybe going over more to the western side?
Is that a Mike or a Jamie question?
I think it's a coastal question.
I'll try. This is a bit of an interesting one. There's some erosion that occurred, due to a specific event, and it's technically on road reserve, although it's far, far away from the formed road. And so one view is that, this is just nature taking its course. Every time nature moves, if we jump in and try and engineer it, it's a pretty foolhardy way of trying to treat it. But then the other side of it is there's sort of maintained as a reserve, and the parks team have some interest in that. So what we've done for now is to make sure that any hazard to anyone using that area has been covered off, so people are kept away from any steeper eroding face. And I don't have any more information on what the proposal is there. I'm sorry, but Richard might.
Richard.
So I think that from on top of that, sorry, I'm just picking it up out of an email, but there's some work going on with the consents team at the moment to determine whether a full or temporary resource consent will be required, and then to go through the process of obtaining that resource consent. But I think my understanding also is the outlet is at the moment discharging more or less in a straight line out to the sea, whereas previously it was cutting across the front and causing erosion of the coast care work that had gone on there.
If you're able, between the two of you, to find any more information, would you be able to make that available to Councillor Hill, Butler and myself, perhaps?
You can do that.
Thank you. Councillor Ogilvie, did you have your hand up? Oh, I had Councillor Butler, was that all?
Yes, thanks very much.
There, thank you. Councillor Ogilvie.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. There's just a question regarding the collective. Thanks for that explanation. The Peach Island situation, is that part of the stop bank work or is that a separate work altogether? Mike, you know?
We are doing part of that as stop bank work.
Thank you. Jamie, I think we'll move on to transportation. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any more to add to my report, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Bayling.
Jamie, I'm interested in this pothole work that you're doing, you're testing from the UK.
The underwater potholes.
Yeah. No, because I can think of a number of where we've got fords and things that, you know, get a lot of damage and then they never clear. So there's water in them all the time. And do you think it's going to be successful? I note that it is so far. But.
Yeah. Look, so far so good. You know, we are trying a few things that are perhaps new to us, maybe not new internationally, but the Alliance have been doing a lot of good work to try, to try and put the feelers out and find things that might work for some of the problems we have.
Certainly in that part in Lane where you're trying it, that's quite a busy little ford there actually. So, and historically quite old, so it'll be interesting to see how it does work. Because some of the culverts there have been blocked as well, haven't they?
Yeah, a lot of those old concrete fords that were built over the decades. You know, some of them are coming up due for renewal, and we really need to decide what we're going to do, how long we can hold them without some expensive interventions.
Councillor McKenzie.
Makes me think of the dartboard. Anyway, I won't mention that. Just
you can ask about it.
I'll let the chairman ask about that this time. So just with respect to Waka Kotahi and our $2.32 million, I mean, so we've spent the money, we've incurred the cost. I mean, actually that does come at a cost to the council. So is there any risk that we're not going to get our money? That's my first question.
In my experience, I'd say our level of risk is very low that we won't get the money. In fact, you know, almost non-existent. But the longer it goes on, the more holding costs this council are incurring for for the debt and the interest associated with that. But verbally we've been told we'll get it. It's just got to work its way through the system.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we just need to keep our eye on that because, it's costing us the fact that they're not paying it when we've incurred the expenditure. So, and then just be interested in your comment on respect to road safety. So this comes to paragraph 8.40 in your report. And I don't want to sort of overreact to what's been happening, but this seems like a lot of incidents in comparison to, say, same period last year or the year before. So I'm wondering, you know, can you put this into context for me? And are you concerned about it? And what does it mean for our speed review? And be interested in your comment.
I mean, we're always concerned about it. What we've found over the years, and if you look at the annual reporting we do, in terms of the total number of fatal and serious crashes, year to year, it can vary quite dramatically. I think the worst year we've had in the last 5 was 2017 when we had over 30 fatal and serious crashes. The following year we had 10. You know, it just jumps around a lot. But we have some very important work that, you know, we've been working on with you guys, which is the speed management plan is critical, in my view, to addressing our ability to say that our network is safe and to deliver a safe network. Just to illustrate that, Auckland Council did some analysis on they changed a large number of speed limits in mid-2020. And in the 18 months, in the time since that change, they've seen something like a 46% reduction in fatalities on the roads that they treated. overall, their whole district does still have an increasing trend in casualty numbers, but it's quite mind blowing that the effect they've had on those roads where they have implemented safe and appropriate speed limits. So that reinforces to me that that's important work for us to do here as well. And then we've of course got our walking and cycling strategy, which will help us deliver a safer network for people walking and cycling in our urban areas. And the incident on Champion Road just really put that into stark relief for us in terms of that not needing to happen if we had a system that was set up right for everybody.
Of course, there was one on the beach road that was a little weird as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there's still some common themes coming through around impairment, and that's going to be a constant struggle in partnership with the police. But we can do what we can do to deliver the Vision Zero.
Any further comments? Councillor Ogilvie.
Yeah, thanks for your report, Jamie. Page 89, really, this is the bridges and structures part. Is there a program to sort of repaint those, I suppose, rails, the wooden rails around some of the corners and so forth? Is that part of the program?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, exactly. Yep, the Alliance are focusing on that because some of them are looking pretty untidy.
So they're still on the Community Infrastructure Group activity report. So still got.
A lot of them have, been suffering damage, but
yes.
They're focusing on that.
Do you know whether the Maraho River Bridge is on that list or not, Jamie?
Not off the top of my head, sorry.
No. So is there a list that they're working on, or what's the program? Do you know?
Yeah, well, the list exists in our job scheduling system, so they'll be going around scheduling the jobs. It would be possible to run a report of the jobs they've scheduled.
Have I asked, or Drew Hayes the right person to ask, or okay? And then on page 91, you mentioned the Old Wharf Road widened path. What is the area that we're looking at widening along Old Wharf Road? It's a sequence.
What was this 8.27? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it could be around the section where that path had a very steep crossfall.
Right. Okay.
So I understand it's in that vicinity.
Right. Is that again an Alliance job, is it? Do you know?
I believe that work has been priced and a local contractor, Concrete and Metals, is going to be delivering that work.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is that I was actually walking along that part of the Old Road just yesterday, and I thought it might, particularly on the northern side, and this is on the northern side, then it might be the appropriate place for a cycle lane there. But that's why I was asking the question, not to do anything until the cycle lane strategy and the other projects are actually finalised. But if it's underway now, then fine. But I wasn't quite sure just where it was, whether on the north side of Old Wharf Road or the south side, and so on.
Might be best to speak directly to Steve Elkington, who's looking after that.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Thanks for the chair.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Oh, thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to get an update on the.
You've gone on mute for some reason.
Doesn't seem to unmute properly. I just wanted to get an update on the Innovating Streets funding, and it was such a fantastic fund to allow those works at the Golden Bay High School corner. And I think it was mentioned at maybe the previous operations committee that this fund was possibly going to be available to us to do quite a lot of, safety works on around footpaths and things like that. So is that still a goer, or where are we up to with that? So I'm just thinking, of a couple of places where, some road markings to make things safer would be good, and Golden Bay anyway.
Thank you, Councillor. You through you, Mr. Chair. That's going to be an ongoing process. We're you know, I reported we've been shortlisted. The process from here is over the next 2 months, staff are working with Waka Kotahi's team, and we've got to nail down still the scope of and total value of works that we would like to do as part of that project. There's a series of workshops, one of which is just started actually, that we're attending to make sure we're aligned. There's 17 councils in this program. So look, that's not going to be signed off until July sometime. So there's a fair bit of work still to do to actually secure any funding, and we're working through that.
Okay, well, that would be, hopefully we can be successful in that.
I'm not sure if that was, sorry, I missed that, Steve.
Sorry, my reception drops out a wee bit. I just made the comment that I hope that we can have some success in that round.
Thank you. So nothing further. So Jamie, just a couple of concluding questions from me, and in relation to Stock Road on page 89, understand that, and I've seen the draw, it looks really good, and it's got the usual things. We've tried to drop it, but I was made aware yesterday that in one place the water's actually coming up from the ground, and that can be a common problem in those clay, mercury type clay areas. Is there anything that can be done to address that, and that likely to affect the seal?
Yeah, when we visited that site, they've done a lot of work to try and address that issue, but it's very difficult if the water really wants to get up from underneath. So they put in what drainage they could to try and get the water out, and we'll just have to monitor that.
Right. So it may be a further drainage issue. And then just on Tapua Batten, you've talked about the Great Taste cycle trail. Two things in relation to that. Now we've opened the bridge. Potentially there may be a need for a signage to advise motorists that there'll be increased cyclists on that road. And secondly, will we look at the speed limit on that road pretty promptly in the speed review management plan?
Yeah, the signage, the team are already looking at that, and the speed limit will also be wrapped up in the speed management plan. And look, just to illustrate how things are looking on speed limits, the safe and appropriate speed under the speed management guidance nationally for any unsealed road, the maximum speed limit would be 60 kilometres an hour.
Right. And so can we do that as a blanket though, or do we still have to do it road by road?
Well, that's up to each council or each road controlling authority. So you could do it on an area-wide basis. You could target specific roads.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot to work through when we're developing and finalising that speed management plan.
So is Megan currently working on that, or going to be, or someone?
So that's been delivered by the strategy. The strategy team. So Claire Scott is leading that, and I think a workshop's been scheduled for later in June.
Okay,
the council.
Thank you, Councillor Dowler. Did you have something, or you just? Yep.
It's for Richard and Jamie actually. This one. I got summons down to the Coomera's at the end of Staple Street, Motueka, a few weeks ago to look at some issues regarding a river drain and a UDA drain. But anyway, while I was there, I was also asked to look at the reserve where the cycle trail comes out along the beachfront into the Coomera area. You know, the Coomera area there used to see the Nelmac trucks down there, keeping the area reasonably clean with gorse and blah, blah, blah. It's starting to overgrow a bit. The potholes, after you leave the tar seal onto the shingle into the car park area, they're starting to get a little bit deeper. So I just don't think we've had a little bit of maintenance here for a while. Just wondering if someone could go down and have a bit of a nose and see what the go is around there to tidy it up. The the young fellas seem to be having a few parties down near the farmer that called me down, had to go down and clean up about 72 beer bottles that have been thrown over the fence into his stock paddock on the Friday night. And he rang me on the Saturday morning. So I went down on the Saturday afternoon and had a look, and that's when I drove in and I thought, this is actually getting a bit untidy. So I just thought I'd wait till now just to capture both of you in the room. That's all. Thanks.
Any comment, Jamie?
Noted. We'll have to follow up.
Thank you.
On that.
What?
10 cents each.
Oh, okay, right.
$7 each, those bottles.
Right, I think we're just, Councillor Ogilvie.
Just a quick comment, Barry. I think that road is actually Dock Road rather than Council Road. Well, I think that was the response when I asked somebody last year actually. But I may be wrong because I know there's Lynn's Road and Dock Road, and I think there's also Maori involvement there as well in that whole area.
But we would have some responsibility for the cycle trail across there, though, wouldn't we?
I suppose we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. However, I just thought.
With that, is there any further questions? Would someone like to move that we receive the operations report? Councillor McKenzie will move. Councillor Dale will second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against? Resolution is carried. Do we have anything further, Robin, on the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, but I have had a question from Jean McFarlane. Do you want to start the elections meeting earlier or take a break? But I think we need to take a break because there may be some councillors who aren't here today that may want to attend.
Yeah, I think we should go, but it's two, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that we'll have to, you just let Jenny know that. So thank you all for your attendance and enthusiastic input, and you can have a long lunch.